Hello, Year 8. Today we're going to learn to divide a quantity in a given ratio. To share a certain amount in a given ratio, you must first know the total number of parts in the ratio. For example, the ratio 2 to 3 has a total of 5 parts. The 5 parts comes from adding together the 2 and the 3 to make a total of 5 parts in the ratio. If I was to give you an example of what that means, maybe I could be making pancakes and I might have 2 parts flour to 3 parts milk. I am adding a total of 5 parts for that recipe. Looking at question number 1, I want to practice just finding the number of parts in the ratio by adding the two numbers together. So 2 to 5, the number of parts is 2 plus 5, which is 7 parts in that ratio. In part B, 4 to 3, 4 plus 3 is also 7, so there are 7 parts in that ratio. Part C, 6 to 13, if I add those together, that makes 19 parts in that ratio. And in D, 2 plus 3 plus 5, adding all three numbers together, there are 10 parts in that ratio. Now that's very important that we can do that first, because now we're going to divide amounts by a ratio. So look at example number 2. We have 72 meters and we're going to divide it in the ratio of 1 to 8. The first question says, part A says, how many parts are in this ratio? So 1 plus 8 means that there is 9 parts. Or when I see a question like this, I like to go, there are a total of 9 parts in that ratio. So to do part B, I now want to divide the 72 into that ratio. Now, if this was to represent two people, where one person got 1 part and the other person had 8 parts of something, the first person had 1 out of a total of 9 parts. So we can write that as a fraction. We say 1 out of the total of 9 parts, and we times that by the amount that we're dividing, which is 72. The second person gets 8 out of the total of 9 parts, and we times that by 72. So there are two calculations here because there is 2 different people that are getting something from this ratio. So let's type this into our calculator. The first person gets 1 over 9, and we times that by 72. The first one is 8 meters. The second one, we just change that top number to be an 8, and the second amount is 64 meters. Now you should notice that if you add those two amounts together, so you go 8 plus 64, that is the 72 meters that we divided up in that ratio. So that's it, that's how you do the question. Let's do another one just like it. So in question 3, we want to divide 234 in the ratio 4 to 5. So the first thing we do is we add together our two numbers to say that there is 9 parts in that ratio. Then we're going to make our fractions. The first person gets 4 out of the 9 parts, and we times that by 234. The second person gets 5 out of the 9 parts, and we times that by 234. Maybe this was shares in a business and they're dividing up their profits. So let's go 4 over 9 times it by 234, and the first person gets $104. The second person gets 5 out of the 9 parts. They are getting $130. Okay, so you need both of those amounts to divide that one up. Let's go on to the next page, question 4, and do another one. This ratio has 3 parts to it, which means we're going to need to do 3 calculations. First of all, we add them all up. 2 plus 3 plus 5 is a total of 10 parts in that ratio. And now the first person in that ratio gets 2 out of the 10 parts, and I times that by 500. The second person gets 3 out of the 10 parts, and we times that by 500. The final person gets 5 out of the 10 parts, and you times that by 500. All right, then I like to calculate each one. 2 out of 10 times it by 500. The first person gets $100. Okay, change the 2 to be a 3, and the second person gets $150. And then finally, changing it to a 5, the last person gets $250. So I have split the 500 up between the 3 people in the ratio, and they get $100, $150 for the second person, and $250 for the third person. So that is a large part of this topic, is being able to divide in a ratio. So that's a very important skill there. But now we're going to hit some word questions. So these might be a little bit different. Let's have a look at question 5. In a class of 30 students, the ratio of right-handed students to left-handed students is 5 to 1. So the 5 represents the right-handed students and the 1 represents the left-handed students, because that was the order it was written in here. Right-handed to left-handeds. So right-handers are on the left and the left-handers are in the second spot. It says there that I want to find the number of right-handed students. Just the right-handers. I don't really mind about left-handed people at the moment. In that ratio, there is a total of 6 parts. So for just the right-handers, 5 out of the 6 people are right-handed, and I times that by the 30 students. So I only have to do the 1 calculation because I didn't need to know the number of left-handers, just the number of right-handers. If you did the extra and worked out the other one as well, that's okay, you've just done extra work. So there is 25 right-handed students out of the 30, so we kind of know the other 5 had to be left-handed. Moving on to question 6. The ratio of adults to children is 3 to 2. So 3 is the adults and the 2 is C for children. So that's a total of 5 parts in that ratio. If a train carries 800 passengers, so there's a total of 800 passengers, find the number of adults and children on the train. So I want to find both parts. So first of all, the adults. 3 out of the 5 parts are adults. I times that by 800, and that will give me the number of adults. 2 out of the 5 parts were children, times that by 800, and that will give the number of children. Calculator time. 3 over 5, times it by 800, and we get 480 people that are the adults. Then 2 out of 5 times 800 means 320 are children on the train. Question 7. The ratio of girls to boys in Year 8 is 3 to 4. If there are 64 boys in Year 8, how many girls are there? It looks very similar to what we were just doing, but there is a difference. Normally, we are told the total number of people. So we might be told, the left-handers to right-handers, but there's a total of 30 kids in the classroom, whatever it was. In this one, we're told that the ratio is 3 to 4, and there is 64 boys. We already know how many boys there are. We don't know the total. So this is a different type of question, and we need to set this up a little bit differently. There are 2 ways that I'm going to show you to do this, and you might pick your favourite, but let me show you both of them. First of all, the ratio 3 to 4 represents girls for the 3 and boys represent the 4, because that was the order that it was written in. If I find an equivalent ratio underneath, I know that there needs to be 64 boys, and I want to find this missing box here to find out how many girls there are. So ratios work a lot like fractions. If I can work out how many times bigger the boys' side of that ratio has gotten, I can do the same thing to the girls' side to find the missing box. So I'm going to use my calculator to cheat a little bit. If I do 64 divided by 4, that means that I'm timesing by 16. And you can check that. You go 4 times 16. Yes, it does equal 64. So that means I want to times the 3 by 16 to find out that the number of girls is 48. So therefore, 48 girls. So that is a good method to use. The trouble with that method is that some people find it tricky to find out what they're timesing by, and it can, if they're not nice whole numbers, it can be a little bit difficult. So here comes the second method, and if you don't really have a preference, I would suggest that you do most of the questions in the second method that I'm about to show you, because we're going to be doing something very similar to this when we do rates. So if we do the same kind of working out for both of them, hopefully that will make it easier for you to remember. So remember that ratios can also be written as fractions. So the ratio 3 to 4, I'm going to go 3 over 4, and that is girls on the top and boys on the bottom. So that fraction has to be equal to something with girls over boys again. So I'm trying to find the number of girls, which I'm going to call x, and there are 64 boys, so 64 goes on the bottom. So each fraction has girls on the top, boys on the bottom. So the first ratio, 3 girls over 4 boys. Second fraction is x that I'm trying to find over 64 boys. And we've just done a big topic on solving equations, so hopefully this next part will be easy. To solve an equation that has a fraction on both sides, there is a nice little shortcut you can do, which is called cross multiplying. What you do, if I want to find the x, I'm going to multiply the x diagonally with the number diagonally across from it. So 4 times x is 4x. Then you go equals, and you multiply the other diagonal. 3 times 64. So 3 times 64 is 192. So I go 192 like that. Okay, then to get rid of the 4 in front of the x, that has been multiplied with the x, so I'm going to divide by 4. Divide by 4. Okay, gets rid of the 4, and now we go 192 divided by 4, and there is our 48 girls again. Okay, so as I said, either method is okay, but let's try to do the fraction method more because it's going to help us with some other questions down the track. Part B, what is the total number of students in Year 8? Now, Year 8 has both boys and girls in it, so if I now know that there were 64 boys and we found out that there were 48 girls, we add those together to be a total of 112 students in Year 8. Question 8. Jenna makes cordial. It requires the ratio of syrup to water to be 1 to 4. If Jenna uses half a cup of syrup, how much water should she add? So we're going to do the fraction method here. So we're going to have the syrup on the top and water on the bottom for each fraction. So my first one was syrup over water is 1 over 4. Then if Jenna uses half of a cup of syrup, so the half of a cup is on the syrup on the top, and how much water means I'm trying to find the number on the bottom of that fraction this time. Now, because I'm using my fractions here, I can cross multiply whichever way I want to first. So I'm trying to find the x, I'm going to do the x first. Let's times the x with the 1, 1 times x is 1x or x equals 4 times 0.5 is 2, and that's it, just 2 cups. So for half a cup of syrup, she's going to need 2 cups of water. Okay, that's the end of our lesson. You can do pages 5 to 7 of your workbook, please.